We hear all the time about teams making halftime adjustments to win ball games, like we saw on Sunday for the Chicago Bears against the San Francisco 49ers. But what does that actually mean? And what did that look like for the Bears in this game? We'll dive into the All-22 film and look at where exactly the Bears made those changes that helped lead to the victory.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook. Join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk. And make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. Today's episode of Locked On Bears is presented by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projections, you can win up to 10 times your money back on your first entry. First-time users can get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with our promo code LOCKEDON. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. On the show today, we'll dive into this Bears All-22 film and kind of go through what we learned about things that weren't going well in the first half and how they were able to turn things around in the second half. We'll start with Justin Fields and the offense. Some of the things Luke Getsy did differently as a play caller to kind of overcome some of the areas that they were struggling in the first half. We'll look at Justin Fields' decision-making on a few good and bad situations there as well, and how we're seeing some of that progress from him. Then we'll look at this Bears defense, where they were struggling in the first half with this 49ers offense, where they buckled down a little bit more in the second half and found some ways to contain Trey Lance in different ways and limit their running game a bit to make him have to throw, and rely on the environment and the field conditions to also help limit some of that production. And we'll wrap up looking at some of the other notable standout players and some of the other things we learned about this Bears team in the game. Some depth chart questions that start to become a little bit more clear and where we're sort of seeing guys stepping up and guys still having some work to do. But I think most remarkably, right, this Bears offense goes from struggling to get the ball past midfield in the first half to scoring 3 touchdowns in the second half to pull away and ultimately secure and hold on to this Bears victory. And I think you saw, in the first half, certainly they weren't running the ball well. And I don't know that they ever consistently opened up the running game, but that was part of the problem. They were getting into these, third and long type situations, and there was some conservative play calling in those third and long situations. A couple of handoffs and draws, a couple of screen passes on those, and in part because, the offensive line was struggling to give Justin Fields time to throw in the pocket and struggling a little bit to get space going in the ground game. Upon watching it with the All-22 film, where you can really see it from a much wider angle, you can see the full field, and you can also see it from Justin Fields' angle behind the quarterback. A couple of things stood out in that. One was that I thought the tight end blocking was much more influential than when you watched it the first time. That the Bears' offensive line itself wasn't getting a great push, but I thought the more disruptive losses in run blocking came from the tight end position. I thought Cole Kmet particularly struggled in the ground game, and that the offensive line might not have been moving the line of scrimmage super far back and not creating the world's biggest holes, but they weren't necessarily getting, they weren't the ones getting blown up, right? It wasn't often that it was offensive linemen, pick a lineman, letting their guy get right into the backfield and blow the play up to make a tackle for loss. A lot of times it's the linemen aren't winning, but they're not losing. They're kind of just taking the defensive player where he wants to go, but not letting him get all the way in the backfield, just kind of flowing with the play. And then the running back's trying to cut back. And that's where the tight end block is the last one there in the line of scrimmage. And that's where more of that direct backfield penetration was often coming from there. And I thought that became a bit of a challenge, especially with the 49ers safety that really just took over some of those plays. And I'm still not 100% positive on how to pronounce his last name. Is it Hufanga or Hufanga? Their 5th-round pick from last year, who we definitely overlooked, at least on this podcast going into that game. He was such a dynamic threat for them in run defense in that first half. But then you get to the second half. And I thought from a passing standpoint, first and foremost, Luke Getsy went to more quicker passing concepts, right? And that didn't limit them from still being able to take shots downfield, but it was much more of a quicker set of reads for Justin Fields. I think he might have been reading them quicker as well, but like the route concepts that he's going to, it takes your eyes in a more natural place to be able to go 1, 2, and 3 more quickly than say you have to go like 1 on your left, 2 on your middle, 3 on your right, and then back to 4 on your left, and then, you know what I mean, where the progression takes longer to get through based on where your eyes are going to go. But like the Equanimeous St. Brown touchdown, for example, right? It's a mesh concept. You have double crossing routes underneath that are just literally crossing each other as sort of a man-beating concept. And you have Equanimeous St. Brown running a deep corner route off of that, and then just a receiver in the flat. And like you're reading like flat to corner to crossing route. And those are all happening very similarly within the same field of vision that you can just go, okay, flat's not there, crossing route, corner was there, and then also crossing route was going to be there too. But Fields didn't need to get there because he just had to read the middle of the field safety, see that he stuck with the crossing route, and then boom, hit that deep corner route that he flattened out a little bit more to get over the top of the cornerback. It was a great read and a great throw, and it's quicker processing that way. Or the Byron Pringle play, it's like it's his first read, hit that wheel route. And throughout that second half, you saw the plays be more quick in Fields' decision-making there. And not just Fields himself, but in the way they structured the plays for Fields to be able to go through them more quickly. And with that, he was also, I struggle to say, like, he's not too quick to run out of the pocket, but he was quicker to leave the pocket. You know, in the first half, he was trying to hold on. He was trying to keep plays going. In the second half, his legs were much more intentionally part of plays, not only in the ground game, which I think was the bigger adjustment we saw there, right? More intentional about read option plays to set up Justin Fields as the keeper. You know, they had one where they optioned Nick Bosa, and they had the tight ends like arc block around him instead of just leaving him unblocked and blocking front side. Like they blocked backside for Fields. So whether Fields kept it or handed it off, each ball carrier would have blockers on the play. They made it more an intentional part of the offense. And same thing, the RPOs. They mixed in a few more of those in the second half, and more so like Fields had more opportunities to pull them and throw on the RPOs and really make the defense have to respect that and stretch the field a little bit more horizontally. So it just felt like from a play calling standpoint, they let Fields' legs become more of a weapon and made that more intentional, as opposed to in the first half when it was more like he just had to do it because he had no other choice, and it was to save his own skin, get out of the pocket and stuff. Once he started turning up field and using those legs to actually move the ball and not just to extend the passing plays, it built that confidence. It opened things up a little bit more, and it really stressed the San Francisco 49ers defense, in addition to then also the passing plays themselves being quicker plays. I think Getsy wanted to see how his offensive line would do. No, I think he still helped the offensive line in the first half. Still left tight ends and running backs in to block and to help chip on those plays, but and ran some screens and stuff off of that. It wasn't that he ignored the offensive line in the first half, but I think he was trying to see if he could get some of the longer things to develop in the first half, and they weren't getting as much of it. And so I think you saw that all speed up a bit more in that second half, very intentionally, along with using Fields' legs more intentionally. And I think that helped really open up the offense, string together plays, and get them into less third and longs and more third and shorts so they could keep these drives alive. Plus, you add in the penalties that the 49ers had that helped the Bears offense move the ball, and the turnover from Eddie Jackson getting the interception gave the Bears good field position on one of those drives too. It's not just purely coaching halftime adjustments. There are game script situations that do affect that as well, but I think that's how you saw this Bears offense turn around quite a bit in that second half. You also saw this Bears defense change up a little bit of the ways that they were defending Trey Lance. I think there was a big change that happened to the 49ers offense, a couple of them really, that made life easier on the Chicago Bears. We'll kind of go into what was different for this Bears defense in the second half versus the first half next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at PrizePicks, the better way to do daily fantasy football. Because with PrizePicks, it's not you against other players. You are in control. It's you against the house. You pick 2 to 5 players, and you decide if they will score more or less than their PrizePicks projections. They offer projections not only for Bears games, but across the sports landscape. College football, NBA, MLB, college basketball, NHL, PGA, esports, WNBA, NASCAR, I mean, you name it, PrizePicks is there for you, and you can earn up to 10 times your money back on any entry. It's really easy to make an entry. It just takes like literally 60 seconds or less. It's super simple. And then when you're ready to withdraw, it's safe, it's fast, it's easy. The money comes right back to you. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 when you enter in our promo code LOCKEDON. So if you deposit $100, they'll give you $100. You deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you extra $50. Just use that promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match at prizepicks.com. One of the other sponsors here on the Locked On Bears podcast that I really love is our friends at Athletic Greens, because they hooked us up with AG1, and it's a product I use literally every single day. AG1 is like a multivitamin that you drink. It's a powderized multivitamin. You mix it up with water, you shake it up in the morning, and you drink it. And it not only does it taste good, but it's like a superfood. It's a combination of 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, probiotics, adaptogens that helps with your immune system, your gut health, your nervous system, your energy, recovery, your focus, your aging. It really does give you that little extra give. Like I'm a person who I do not drink caffeine. I don't drink coffee. I don't drink caffeinated soda. I don't take caffeine. But AG1 helps give me just like that little bit of extra, right? There's no crash or anything. It doesn't actually have any energy, like any caffeine type of energy in it, but it's just that sort of like natural feeling that when you feel it absorb in your stomach, you just start your day off right. I love to take it first thing in the morning and just really kind of get that pure absorption in the stomach, and it just feels like it's filling in all the gaps that I'm not getting from my regular food. It's a great time to take control over your health and check out Athletic Greens. They're making it super easy. They're going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NFL Network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NFL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. The Chicago Bears defense wasn't having, loads of trouble with the 49ers in the first half. 10-0 at halftime. Not a dominating first half by any means, but it wasn't like, oh my gosh, the Bears have no answers for whatever the 49ers are throwing at them. But at the same time, the 49ers were able to get the offense moving a little bit there, and certainly got it moving more in that first half than in that second half. I mean, the scoreboard pretty well reflects how that panned out with, of course, 0 points in that second half. And I was curious to kind of figure out, okay, like what the heck went wrong for the 49ers, or what were the Bears doing to try and, slow that down? How were they able to slow down the 49ers in that way? And the thing that stood out to me upon rewatch was specifically the ground game for the 49ers disappeared quite a bit in that second half. And there were, I think, a combination of 3 or 4 main factors that stood out to me. First of all, I do think, separate from what the Bears did, the Elijah Mitchell injury was humongous in this game. I think that has gone overlooked and not talked about enough in the aftermath of that he is very fast and runs well and decisive and downhill. And when he left and Jeff Wilson took over as the other running back, Jeff Wilson was significantly less effective individually as a runner. I would compare it to what we saw from David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert on the Bears offense, where it's like it's the same offensive line and 2 running backs, and one running back is having a lot more production than the other. We're going to get into Montgomery and Herbert in particular and what I saw from both of them a little bit later on in the podcast, but it just was that feeling that like when Jeff Wilson was the running back in there, he wasn't getting through the hole very quickly. He wasn't super decisive with his running. Sometimes he was making the wrong reads as a runner, and he couldn't get anything going. And I don't think specifically, like it looked like the Bears linebackers were stepping down and being a little bit more aggressive. I mean, the run fits from these 2 linebackers, Roquan Smith and Nick Morrow, were both pretty bad, especially in the first half. It was really bad linebacking play from both of them. Second half was a little bit better, but the Bears are going to struggle to stop the run this season. I have a feeling that's going to be a recurring theme. Not that it's going to be the reason they lose football games, but teams are going to have success running the ball on the Bears, I think. But other things that changed. The 49ers stopped handing it off to Deebo Samuel in the second half, and I don't know why. I think they did it once in the fourth quarter, if I remember correctly, but like that was like their whole touchdown scoring drive was like jet sweep to Deebo Samuel this way, put Deebo Samuel in the backfield, and toss it to him that way. I think that was the touchdown run. Right? Like they made Deebo Samuel this running weapon that we saw last season, and he was like too fast and too good for this Bears defense to get to and stop consistently as a runner. I mean, he had, in the first half alone, he had 6 carries for 40 yards. And in the game, he finished with 8 carries for 52 yards. I think he got one more in there, and it might have been on a backwards pass on a screen on one of them, but like they very rarely went back to him as an actual ball carrier in that second half. And I was really surprised because he was just as effective as Elijah Mitchell, and Jeff Wilson was not. And I think that was a big part of it. And then the other thing the 49ers would do is like, as they got deeper into the game, they would just go with no actual running back on the field. It would be Kyle Juszczyk, the fullback. Like they'd be in shotgun on second and whatever. And it's Trey Lance and Kyle Juszczyk. And it's like, there's a chance they could hand the ball off to him, I guess. But chances are, if there's not a true running back in the game, that they're not going to run the ball. So the Bears could sit back and pass rush. And that was even before the Bears got way ahead on the scoreboard, right? Like it was 13-10. And they just like kept taking the running back out of the game. And I was like, why? Then there's just not that real threat of run. So the Bears didn't really have to worry as much about the running game in that point. It could just drop back into coverage and pass rush, and everyone kind of knew their responsibilities that way. It was just weird things that the 49ers did that I felt like they either outcoached themselves, or certainly the Bears were a step or two ahead of them from a preparation standpoint. But then the Bears also were very intentional. If we're looking for things like the Bears specifically adjusted to, about containing Trey Lance and keeping things inside, particularly, as a runner. They made sure that they were not letting him escape the pockets horizontally and get outside and extend passing plays for the Bears coverage to break it down the longer the play goes, or for him to be able to take off on those edges. They kept things between the tackles as much as possible for Trey Lance as a runner and as a passer. There was even, like when they'd go to the stretch zone rollout plays, the defensive ends would just crash at the quarterback and not even worry about the running back on a lot of those plays. There was a third down there. I think it was the third down interception play. Like they dropped, I think it was Travis Gibson as a QB spy. They rushed 3 and dropped one of the defensive ends as a quarterback spy because they just were not going to let him scramble for that first down, and ends up, of course, throwing the interception to Eddie Jackson. And that wasn't something we really saw them go to much at all in the first half. Like when Trey Lance did scramble, and he had a couple of nice scrambles in the second half, he had to like navigate a really murky pocket and scramble up the middle because they were not letting him get to the edges of the pocket. And I thought that worked really well to limit the amount of speed he could build up working his way where there's a lot more space on the edges. Instead, he has to kind of go short area and can't get ahead of steam behind him when he's going to finally get past the line of scrimmage. And that limited a lot of the damage that the 49ers offense was able to actually do there. I think they also tried to do some different looks coverage-wise on Trey Lance to try and get in his head a little bit more. And then also I do think the Bears knew that as the rain got worse and worse, that it was going to be harder and harder to throw the ball. And the fact that the 49ers were then down 9, down 2 scores, they knew the 49ers had to pass, and it was a lot harder to pass when that rain was really coming down full force. And so I think collectively it made for a really tough situation for the San Francisco 49ers, and the Bears didn't have to revolutionize everything they were doing defensively. They just had to sort of stick to their responsibilities. I think they cleaned up the communication on the back end and coverage, so those deep crossing routes weren't open as much, and it all sort of came together nicely for really putting it on Trey Lance's shoulders to say, all right, young kid, beat us with your arm specifically. And he wasn't able to do that. I'm trying not to judge Trey Lance too much from a developmental standpoint because of how bad the rain was. I mean, if we're gonna look at Justin Fields and say, yeah, it was hard for Fields to throw in the rain, it was also very hard for Trey Lance to throw in the rain. And so it was advantageous that the Bears got their quarterback running game going, got points on the board, could pull ahead, and not have to be playing from behind, needing to pass in an absolute monsoon. So I think those are some of the main differences we saw first half to second half that really stood out on that all 22 tape. But I want to look specifically at a few different Bears players and a few different Bears position groups that stood out to me on tape that you might not always pick up on fully just watching it the first time through live. We'll get into David Montgomery, Khalil Herbert in the backfield, Tevin Jenkins on the offensive line, the perceived wide receiver depth chart, the tight end rotation, the cornerback rotation, as well as how they'd use these defensive ends next on Locked On Bears. I bet some eager and encouraged Chicago Bears fans made some pretty big money betting on their Bears with the upset through our friends at BetOnline. It's going to be the number one source for all of your pro and college football betting needs and sports information this season. The Bears were big underdogs. There's a big money on that money line if you had picked the Bears straight up, and certainly the Bears more than covered if you had the Bears. I think it was plus 6.5 is where the line ended at BetOnline. But hey, you can start looking ahead to Green Bay. The Bears are 9-point underdogs there if you want to press your luck and you want to see if they could pull off another win there, or certainly the over-under, and there's some other fun in-game live betting you can do at BetOnline. It's your continued source for all the sports wagering information, live betting, esports, and scores, not just for Bears and pro football, but of course, Major League Baseball season still going on, boxing, MMA, golf, and when we get up to it, basketball season again, certainly the tail end of the baseball season, plenty of betting there as well. Head on over to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about all the different trends and actions you need to know. BetOnline, where the game starts. This game against the 49ers, to me, felt like the start of the changing of the guard at running back. Not that they're instantly now going to go to Khalil Herbert as the lead guy all the time and David Montgomery is going to shrink away into oblivion. No, but I think it was a continuation of what we saw a little bit. We saw dibbles of it last season, and now it was time. Now it's like fresh slate. Matt Eberflus, Luke Getsy, new offense. Let's see how these two running backs go. And clearly, right? I mean, the box score illustrates it well. Khalil Herbert, 5 yards a carry. David Montgomery, 1.5 yards per carry. Smaller sample size for Herbert, 9 carries to 17. Montgomery is still the guy they kept going back to over and over again. But you saw the same offensive line and largely the same run blocking. I mean, it was the same group. And, some of it's luck, where on some plays, the defense might be doing something, or the play call might just be just right, or the lineman just happened to get a good block on that play that Herbert happened to be the beneficiary of that David Montgomery didn't. But Montgomery didn't have a run longer than 6 yards, and I think Herbert had two, like one for 10 and one for 12 yards, two double-digit length runs there. And I don't think it's all purely luck. I mean, you saw. I think the difference that stood out to me in the All-22 film was like, Khalil Herbert is much more of a decisive downhill runner, so that even when the offensive line isn't creating huge holes or holding small holes open for very long, he just pushes through and trusts that I'm either gonna run into a brick wall or I'm gonna slip through. And more often than Montgomery, like he slipped through. Like David would get the handoff and get to the line of scrimmage, and kind of give you one of those shimmy shakes and try and do his more like short area kind of knifing and cutting and jumping and back and forth and through, and like the holes don't materialize nearly long enough. You just have to go. You have to hit it and you have to get through, because against this 49ers front and with this Bears offensive line that has limitations, you're not going to get massive holes all the time. And Montgomery struggled to find him. He was often trying to cut back when maybe if he had just kind of pushed through that initial hole, it wasn't a big hole, but if you just get to it, just get the ball downhill, move the ball, lower your pads and push through, maybe you can get somewhere. And it just felt like there were so many times when Herbert would just kind of like slide in and slip through because he just said, screw it, like this is where it's supposed to go, and I can see like I don't know how long this hole is going to be open. I can see maybe it's going to open, maybe it's not. I'm just going to go through. And of course, sometimes he had short runs too. Like he had 1 and 2 yard gains, just like David Montgomery did. But other times he was able to just be dynamic and decisive and get downhill and have that quick, that more that like straight speed, because Montgomery is trying to cut and jump and kind of dance a little bit, and Herbert's just going. And that seemed like a very clear and obvious difference between these two guys. Now, it seems like Matt Eberflus really likes David Montgomery. He has spoken very highly of him as a guy who embodies a lot of what they want on offense. They made him an honorary captain for the first game of the season above everyone else that weren't the 4 main captains. So I don't think they're in any hurry to just say, screw it, David Montgomery is not our guy. Because I think they do want David Montgomery. They do like Montgomery and want to give him every chance to be successful. But I just think this feels like a trend that's picked up from last year and is already accelerating to a point where maybe enjoy David Montgomery's last season in Chicago, and that this is going to be the Khalil Herbert and the backfield by committee moving forward after this. We'll see. A lot of season left. Try not to overreact just to one game, but it also includes some of what we started seeing last season, and this seemed to play into that. We'll see when the field conditions are better. There's certainly time for David Montgomery to have more luck and play in a better matchup situation and have big games and keep Khalil Herbert back on the bench, but it's not trending in a super great direction there. A couple of other positions that stood out to me. One, you look at the wide receiver playing time in terms of who played the most snaps. It was 1, Darnell Mooney, of course. Number 2, Equanimeous St. Brown. Number 3, Dante Pettis. Byron Pringle was number 4 on snaps played by wide receivers. I would guess that was probably more due to it being his first game back from injury. He also didn't block particularly well, and I thought Equanimeous St. Brown did, and I wonder if that played a role into it. But like for now, St. Brown is your number 2, and Pettis was playing like your number 3. Velus Jones Jr. will also mix in there somewhere when he returns from injury, so we'll see how this kind of plays out. But right now, it was clearly like Mooney and St. Brown were your 1 and 2, and then Pettis was clearly the 3, and Pringle was in there sometimes. And I'll be curious to see how that played out, because like the Bears, they played their number 2 tight end, Ryan Griffin, more than their number 3 wide receiver. So Griffin played more snaps than Pettis and Pringle. It was like Mooney, St. Brown. It was like Mooney, Kmet, St. Brown, Griffin. They did a lot of 2 tight end stuff. Jake Tongas was in there for a decent number of snaps as well. They put the fullback Kari Blasingame at tight end, did a lot of like 3 tight end looks that sometimes were a fullback, and they could rotate out of the I formation and put him at tight end. They gave a lot of different looks up front, and it felt very refreshing to have a more dynamic looking and versatile type of offense there. Defensively, real quick before we wrap up, Kyler Gordon played every single snap in that game. We thought of him as, he's the slot cornerback, right? And Jalen Johnson and Kindle Vildor are the outside cornerbacks. When you go back through and look, when they were in that base defense, it was kind of what I predicted during training camp when they first started playing Gordon in the slot. Gordon plays outside when there's 3 linebackers on the field. When there's 2 linebackers on the field, Kindle Vildor comes in and Gordon moves into the slot. But Gordon played every single snap in that game. And Vildor is the number 3 cornerback who just happens to play on the outside. Kind of a confirmation of what that plan would be. Gordon struggled. It was not a great debut. I wouldn't say he was terrible, but just he looked like a rookie. And the slot is a very difficult position to play, and they went after him quite a few times. And I'm concerned about Aaron Rodgers going after him, but I'm less concerned about the Green Bay Packers wide receivers that were quite not great against the Minnesota Vikings. I'm getting too ahead of ourselves. We'll be breaking down the Packers game here in the coming days on the podcast. But one last position, defensive end, right? Of course, it was Robert Quinn and the veteran Al-Qadim Muhammad were your 2 starters. Dominique Robinson played more snaps than Trevis Gibson. Gibson was number 4 in this rotation in this game. I don't know if there was a minor injury thing that we didn't hear about or what, but they were playing Dominique Robinson more than Trevis Gibson. Gibson was number 4 in defensive end snaps. They were even playing a 3 defensive end package quite a bit on third downs. They'd put Gibson or Robinson at defensive tackle and just have 1 true defensive tackle and 3 defensive ends. And that was a nice little wrinkle that freed up some of that interior pass rush that I thought played overall pretty darn well. But it gave us a better sense of like how some of these different position rotations and battles are playing out in week 1. And by the way, I thought Tevin Jenkins played really well, or about as well as you could have hoped at right guard. Can we stop the rotation then? I just don't think it benefits him. I want Lucas Patrick on the field, but I think it only hurts Tevin Jenkins if you keep taking him out and then putting him back in, taking him out, putting him back in. When Lucas Patrick's hand is ready to go, make him your center. Get Sam Mustipher the heck out of there. But just let Tevin Jenkins be your right guard. He played well. He earned it. He can do it. I don't think you're gaining anything by having that rotation, and it's frustrating when you're rotating offensive line. That one's going to annoy me until they fully remedy that situation as well. But I hope all of that taught you something. Hope you learned something about this Bears team or that Bears game from the time I spent all day today going through that Bears All-22 film. So I hope if you learned something on this podcast, I hope you'll hit that subscribe button so you'll keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. As the week goes on, we'll preview this Packers matchup. We'll put together a game plan for how the Bears can beat the Packers. We'll look at the Packers' strengths and weaknesses, what the Bears need to do to attack those weaknesses, minimize some of those strengths, and try and start this season 2-0 and do what no one thought was possible with this team, and certainly upset a Packers team that's even a bigger favorite than what the 49ers were in week 1. So come on back for more of that. Keep making Locked On Bears your first listen each and every day, and keep coming back for your next opportunity to bear down.